Hello everyone, welcome to another History of Vlogs video. I'm back, kind of, maybe not, I don't know. But we're doing Weardale Campaign, also known as the Battle of Strahope Park. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Just a little bit of heads up here. This was taken from a documentary I made of the Black Douglas about 2 years ago. So it's not the same quality as I normally do, and also it may be lacking some context of the overall war. I'm just hoping you can put two and two together and understand what's happening without me having to go into it all, because it would take so long by this point. But yeah, I'm going to give you the Battle of Ireland at the start of this video, just so you can get a bit of, bit of context before the Weardale Campaign. And also, yeah, that's really it. It's not one of the best videos I've made. Low effort because I'm just cutting from a documentary and adding a bit of context and some images in that. But please, do like, subscribe, comment. I'm going to do more of the battles in this war that I didn't really cover in the documentary, or didn't cover a lot of, because it was the Black Douglas and a lot of the battles he wasn't fighting at, like the Irish battles and also some Robert the Bruce Civil War battles. But yeah, hopefully I've explained this in a way where you understand what I'm trying to say, and look out for some projects in the future. Some big works is coming up. Me and my friend maybe making a podcast, I don't know, a really short pictish podcast. Anyway, I'll see you all later. Enjoy the video, please like, please comment, and I'll see you all on the next one, hopefully.
Scotland forever!
Time for another raid, but don't worry, it is almost 12 and I've been reading all day, so I'm not going to talk about it. But to sum it up, we battled English again, a lot of money, a lot of bitches, and we crossed the border on the 24th, but King Edward II followed the Scots over the border at the start of August with an army of over 20,000 men. It was clear that a final showdown was imminent. Edward was determined to finish off Scotland, but in the end, Edward's mighty army crossed the border around the beginning of August 1322. They ignored Berwick and headed straight to Lauderdale. Bruce knew they were coming and put a scorched earth policy into operation, making sure there was no crops, no shelter, and no beasts for them to eat. Bruce had pulled his army north of the Forth, basing at Culross in hopes of drawing the rapidly weakening host on, but it seems James had stayed in the Baldy area, lying low in the fastness of Ettrick Forest with a body of men. King Edward had provisioned a fleet of ships, and these were to meet the English at Leith and to, supply the army. And Edward's forces pushed on for Edinburgh, finding nothing to eat along the way. And for 3 days they sat at Edinburgh. Any provision that was carried was long gone, and not being able to enter the Firth of Forth due to contrary winds, and some of the ships had fallen prey to privateers. Realising that the ships were not going to come, King Edward sent outriders in every direction to try and find sheep and cattle. At Tranett in East Lothian, they found one lame cow, and the Earl of Surrey dryly remarked that it was the dearest beef he had ever seen, as it must have cost £1,000 or more. The decision was made to retreat back to England, and the English retreated from battle before fighting a single Scotsman. 300 riders were sent ahead of the English army to secure Melrose Abbey, to sack the building and to possibly find more supplies for the army. But it was not long before James found out about this plan, and without delay he marched his men towards Melrose Abbey, and when the English got there, they were attacked, and Douglas wiped them out. And the survivors of the attack made contact with the rest of the army and told them that the Black Douglas had fallen upon them. The whole force ran like fuck back to England.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Crossing the border on the 2nd of September, King Edward announced that he would remain in England's north, intending to deal with any Scottish incursion. Word had reached that the King Edward was lodged in Revelox Abbey, and the plan was formed to try and capture Edward. Having the English king as a hostage would mean, they would get anything they want, especially full independence. King Edward was shocked when the information came in that the Scots were only 15 miles from him at Northallerton. The direct route through to Revelox went up and over the Hambleton Hills, and Edward stationed forces under the Earl of Richmond. The Scots knew they had to risk a frontal assault on Richmond's forces, as taking the longer route through the hills would let Edward escape. The Scots came from Fosk, but up in the hills, the English had a really defensive spot. Bruce asked which one of his captains should actually lead the attack up the hill, and James stepped forward and said that it should be him. This plan was basically suicidal, But Bruce saw James' brave attempt as a diversionary tactic. Bruce had many Highlanders on this raid, and he knew that it was a particular type of warfare they excelled at, because hills, and that they could use their ability here. James chose a large party of men and made their way forward to the bottom of the hill. Before advancing, James turned around and noticed another group of Scots making their way towards him. It was Randolph. He handed over his own division to another commander and had come to join James's front of assault with a handful of men because, base. Both groups were joined into one and made their way up the incline together, and instantly a hail of arrows and boulders greeted them. Bruce sent his Highlanders up to the cliffs and that bordered the road up the hills. These men climbed quickly to the top of the escarpment, apparently undetected. They immediately launched a charge into the flank of the English forces to lessen the bombardment, battering James and Randolph's detachment. On the top of the hill, carnage ensued. The English hit line began to waver and break. James and his men cleared the top of the escarpment and launched themselves at the English as well as the Highlanders. As soon as resistance began to crumble, Bruce sent Walter Stewart to Riverloch's Abbey with a body of horses, putting all in black to try and capture the King Edward. The English suffered heavy losses, and big names like Richmond and Henry de Sully, the Butler of France, were captured by James. James also captured 2 high-ranking French knights, but Bruce would not hold them to ransom, and he eventually allowed them to return home. Unfortunately, King Edward was warned just in time, and he managed to escape before being captured. But Walter Stewart was based and went not so fucking easy, and he chased him the whole way back to York, and Edward barely managed to escape. He barely managed to get into the city walls. He was almost captured. This battle became known as the Battle of Byron due to the proximity to Byron Abbey to the fight. Although the Scots had failed in their efforts to capture the king, they had defeated him in England on his own turf. The Scottish took what advantage they could from the situation and the confusion and ravaged Yorkshire, as you do. The devastation, never mind the depopulation that the Scots caused across Northern England in this period, was catastrophic. At Easingwold, 84 tenants are described as unable to pay the farm. The Scots were blamed specifically for the ruin of 57 of these. 13 had been killed at the Battle of Mifton and in 1319, 9 at the Battle of Byland in 1322, and 9 killed by Scots either at Easingwood or at places unspecific. Among these last one, John Baker, a tenant at will of an acre and a half, was burnt to death in his home when the Scots arrived there in 1322. 7 other tenants had been driven from neighbourhood by poverty and destruction caused by Scots. 10 died in poverty, 17 were reduced to beggary, and the holding 17 others are described as simply impoverished, burnt and destroyed. And with this, Harclay realised nothing was going to happen, so he made a truce with Bruce and Scotland, and in negotiations Harclay mentioned that he would convince Edward to recognise Scots independence, and Scotland would pay the English king £27,000, which was a huge amount of money at the time. When Edward heard of this, he had Harclay arrested. He got the full penalty of a dragging, hanging and beheading. This sentence was carried out on the 3rd of March 1323. On the scaffold, Harclay told the crowd that there was no hint of treason in his actions. He'd only done what he thought was best for his people. R.I.P. lads. But at least you're in a YouTube video, so it's worth it, I guess. But to add insult to injury, King Edward signed a 13-year truce with Scotland after killing a man for doing it for him. So why did we enter a 13-year-long truce? We don't really know, it's up to debate, but most likely to buy more time, to build more strength and have England get bored and accustomed to peace and accept Scottish independence, which didn't work. But yeah, James was now in his late 30s and had given much of his life in fighting the war. But now he had a lot of time to just be a governor and a lord in feudal times. Bruce gave him lands in Beutal and Galloway, the constableship of Lauder, Cockburn, yes, real place, Bedrule, Staple Gordon and half of Western Kirk. He had control of Jedburgh and its castle and the nearby lands of Bonged Ward. All of these holdings were in southern parts of Scotland, an acknowledgement of James's amazing work in defending the land in these regions. On the 8th of November 1324, Bruce granted James the most famous of all charters that were able to be granted over the years to the illustrious Douglas family. This was the famous Emerald Charter, and this was called this because James was given an emerald ring to seal the bond. Bruce had released the Sully and other 2 French knights that James had taken captive at Byland without ransom. James could have profited hugely from this with the money, so Bruce felt bad for him and gave him money to compensate the loss. And Bruce also gave James another honour The charter basically gave James the right to keep any funds that arose out of the settlement of the criminal jurisdictions, and that he could freely hold this castle and lands unless they were being used for common aid or in defence of the nation. This emerald ring is now lost due to time. Because of the truce with England, James was probably able to spend more time with his family. Yes, he had a family. I haven't mentioned because it's just complicated. We don't even know who his wife was, I think. I couldn't find his wife. He had 2 kids called William VI and Archibald, the Grim. King Edward II wasn't the most diplomatic of people and seems to have lacked personal charm. The situation regarding Scotland and Harclay testifies to that. He consistently promoted his favourites to high positions, and in doing so alienated a lot of his people. The relationship between Edward and his French queen Isabella was not a happy one. There were also rumours that he was gay, which would make sense for his wife not being happy, because But to be fair, he thugged it out and got an heir, and she eventually took one of his enemies, Roger Mortimer, as a lover. Cucked. The King of France also had been promoting that Edward to cross the channel to do homage for the duchy. Isabella suggested that she should take their son, Edward III, King Edward II, from the obligation. Only after she had left with Prince Edward safely far away did Edward II finally realise the mistake he made, and he'd been tricked, and that his son was beyond his control, and Mortimer and his queen were a couple. In September 1326, Isabella and Mortimer landed back in England at Harwich with an army spearheaded by 700 Hainaulters, who were mercenaries, led by John, the brother of Count Hainault. King Edward retreated westwards, and he had alienated the subjects that much he had no proper support, but many lords happily sided with Isabella. It was feared that Edward II would make his way to Ireland, where he could maybe garner some support, but he was captured in South Wales on the 16th of November 1326 and imprisoned in Kenilworth Castle. King Edward was then brought to a court called the name of Edward, Prince of Wales, the legality of which was very questionable, to say the least, but, it's fucking medieval times, who really cares? In January 1327, he was forced to abdicate. The Prince of Wales was crowned King of England the 3rd on the 2nd February 1327. Although there was a truce between Scotland and England, English pirates still thought Scottish ships were fair game, and a lot of Scottish citizens had been killed. And Bruce thought it was time to make the new regime in England aware that he could still be a threat from the north. On the day that King Edward III was crowned, the Scots attacked Norham Castle. King Edward II was moved to Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire, and there, according to Geoffrey Le Baker, writing 30 years later, he was murdered horribly. As he was the Lord's anointed, it could not look as though a hand had been set on him. So a hollow piece of marrowbone was inserted into his anus, and a red-hot poker was pushed into his vitals, killing him, but leaving no obvious marks. It was said that this murder was due to his sexuality. Because there was a new king in England and the new regime in place, negotiations to continue the truce between Scotland and England opened at York, but behind the scenes both nations were mustering men and preparing for war. Edward IV and his advisors realised that because Scotland wanted to be recognised as an independent state, England didn't have much to lose by reopening hostilities. If war went on in their favour, they would win Scotland, and if the Scots kept invading, the Northern Channels would be devastated, but England would not be lost. Basically, the long game they were playing. In June 1327, the talks at York eventually broke down, and the Scots pinned a note to our church door before they left, and on the note it said, "Long beards heartless, painted hoods witless, gay cloaks graceless, make England thriftless." Ladies and gentlemen, the first Scottish shitpost. As a warning of Scotland's unhappiness at being no closer to our goal of recognition, James led a raid over the border. The Sala Chronica tells us that a sizable force of Englishmen gathered and entailed James for only 4 leagues away. They merely watched as he wasted the country in open view of them, because they were scared of him. When James returned home from the raid, he and Randolph rallied together to do something on a much larger scale. This seemed especially timely as they had word that England was preparing to mount yet another invasion. Edward III at the age of 15 was more like his grandfather than his father. He desired military victory and yet again hired the Hainaulters, who helped depose his father. Edward III led his army towards Durham. They had no idea that the Scots under James and Randolph had already crossed the border on the 14th of January, until they saw the smoke of burning villages. The English army, many soldiers were heavily armed, and the horses were huge, with a baggage train that would go on for miles. The Scots, on the other hand, were in their usual quick small horses, and were lightly armed, and carried all the supplies in packs on their horses. The Scots could move so quickly that they could easily outpace the English, and James wanted to show them that he had the ability to do as he wished in their nation. So he led them forward in a hopeless pursuit. For 2 days, they chased the Scots through woods and swamps and wildernesses, and mountains and valleys, just rage-baiting the English. According to Weardale, they could not lose the trail, for the Scots were wasting and burning everything in their path. The Scots eventually lost the English by laying low in the valley of the River Gonless. The English army marched to Hayden Bridge on the River South Tyne, knowing the Scots would have to cross the river on their way home. Because it was feared that the Scots would attack in the night, they slipped in their armour. They had kept loaves behind their saddles, but with all the hard riding, these got soaked with horse sweat. Yummers. And Weardale tells us the size of the army. There were 8,000 knights and squires, 30,000 other armed men, of whom half were mounted on small horses and the other half were foot soldiers and light infantry. And there were also 24,000 archers, not counting the irregulars. It was heavy raining and morale began to crumble, and the English eagerly wanted to fight the Scots. After a few days, the rain began to become so bad that the leather started to rot, and the horses developed sores where their harnesses were rubbing. The English were waiting in the rain, and the Scots went further south, camped in the rising ground south of the River Wear near the village of Strahope. They lived more frugally and had chosen a ground that did not seem to feel the hardship as badly as the English. King Edward IV made an announcement: if anyone could lead them to the Scots, he would give that man a knighthood and an annual income of £100. So obviously, young men rode out in every direction to hoping to, win the prize. And one squire, Thomas de Rokeby, stumbled upon the Scots at Stanhope, but he was captured and taken before James. And once James was told the story by Thomas, he decided to let Thomas go and claim his prize. Even James respected the hustle. When Thomas rode and informed the king where the Scots were, the English quickly broke camp and marched south. On the 15th of July, the English started to deploy in front of the Scots. The Scottish position was most likely on the top of the steep hill on the south bank of the Wear. James would have picked this position well, and the English must have realised that although they outnumbered the Scots 2 or 3 to 1, the position was unassailable. James, from the Scots' hilltop vantage point, could see much of what was going on in the English camp. 1,000 archers were piled up with drink before being sent out to volley fire into the Scottish divisions. And you might be asking, Lugs, why the drink? That is because they were told a story that if James captured an archer, he gave them the choice of losing a hand or an eye before releasing them to make them useless in battle, because James came with a trap to get some English archers into an ambush. He positioned cavalry hidden out in the Scottish flanks, and then covering his famous coat of arms with a cloak, he rode out enticing close to the bowmen. They took the bait, and many of them ran forward, but Robert Ogle, an English squire, recognised James, and obviously shat himself and shouted, "It's Douglas," which caused the archers to run back to the English front line. James, seeing this, singled the hidden riders to charge. Ogle's warning saved many, but Barber tells us that 300 of the archers were killed. Edward IV then sent for an envoy who informed James and Randolph and the others that his king was willing to pull back a distance from the northern bank of the river, and that this would give the chance for the Scots to come down and fight a fair battle. And James said no, and basically said to him, "If you want to fight, come up here and fight me." For 3 days, 2 of the armies sat on either side of the river in a stalemate situation. Each day there were skirmishes between young knights, but those captured one day were usually exchanged the next day for the more prisoners. After 3 days sitting under the cover of night, James moved his entire army a mile or two upstream to an even stronger position. By daybreak, when they were settled in, the English woke up and realised they weren't there. But it wasn't long before the scouts figured out where the Scots were. And after learning this information, the English army up sticks and followed them upstream and settled down on the opposite bank. A similar situation they had just left. The Scots' new position was far better and more defensible. They had tree cover to protect them, but there was also a big massive bog behind them, and the English were soon to learn that they had them trapped. But as far as they were concerned, they could just sit tight. They were between the Scots and the border. It would become a waiting game. And Edward could always call for more supplies since it was England, and James would eventually run out of food. But James was James, and on that night, he assembled 200 of his men, all armed with swords and spears, and they were going to attack the English camp. They were to cut the tent ropes so the occupants would be trapped and would be easy targets. And on the 4th of July, he led them from the Scottish camp and crossed the river well away from the English camp. Stealthily, they approached and found that the English had not set up proper walls and defences, so they were able to reach the edge of the tented encampment unopposed. They broke into a gallop and slashing cut down the ropes of the nearest tents and stabbed at the wriggling bodies underneath, doing his usual screaming Douglas. James, doing his usual screaming Douglas, Douglas, woke up a lot of Englishmen, which must have been terrifying for many, as it was the last thing they ever heard. James cut his way right through the camp till he reached the tent of the King of England himself. Its 3 leopards' banners flying outside. He slashed the ropes and stabbed down into the canvas below. Edward's retainers threw themselves over the king to protect him. If things had went a bit differently, James would have killed him, or managed to haul him into the saddle and make his getaway. But James could sense the English were recovering from the shock, and he began to retreat his men. He blew his horn, and his men knew what that meant, and they all began to beat it and run out of the camp. James, reaching the edge of the camp, paused to make sure that his men were clear and that there were no stragglers, but one of the English soldiers managed to get the jump on him and hit him with a heavy blow, stunning him and almost dropping him from his horse. But James was about that life, and even though he was disoriented, managed to kill the Englishman who jumped him. Meanwhile, the rest of the Scots, having reached the crossing point of the river, realised that James was not with them. They stopped and decided to go back and see if they could find him, because James was loved by his men, and their utmost respect, not caring that the English camp had been awakened and alerted. However, James suddenly appeared and put their worries to rest. After returning to camp, they found out that they had lost a few men, but it was later reported that they had killed 300 men in the English camp. Randolph, finding out that they were how well they failed, suggested that they should have taken the whole amount on the expedition. And it probably would have worked, to be fair, but James admitted that it was too much of a risk, and it was the better call not to do that. Although it was discussed in the camp, James decided that there should not be any pitched battle with the English. He figured that if the Scots could disappear from the position in the night, it would be a heavy blow to the English, who expected battle. Randolph asked how they're going to achieve this, since the English were between them and home, and were also outnumbered. And if they were seen to make any ready to withdraw, the huge army would mobilise itself to throw themselves at the retreating Scots. They were also in a good position, one that the English couldn't easily attack, but a large area of marshland behind them they couldn't escape without heavy casualties. So James told the story. He told a tale of a fox and a fisherman. The fisherman built a little hut by the river, a place where he could easily go and check the nets he had set. The hut was a simple affair with a bed within and only one door to get in and out. It had a fireplace. The glow from the logs burning on the fire lit the scene. The fox had crept inside and begun gnawing on a salmon. The appearance of the fisherman had caught him by surprise, the fisherman blocking the only way in and out. He knew the fox was trapped and drew his sword. The fox knew they had nowhere to hide and desperately looked around the hut for something to help him escape. The fox noticed that the fisherman's cape and hood lying on the bed. He gripped the cape with his teeth and pulled it over across the room onto the fire. The fisherman, seeing the cape beginning to burn, jumped forward to pull it out of the flames, and the fox, seeing his opportunity, ran for the door and made his getaway. And James explained, "We are the fox and they are the fisherman. They think that they have us, but we can escape if we try." The next morning, the English were kept busy gathering up the 300 or so bodies that had been killed during the night. The Scots secretly began to pack up their goods and get ready for a planned withdrawal. As night fell, the fires in the camp were stocked up, horns were blown as usual, and the Scots made their way to the rear of the camp and prepared to cross the marshland. They had tied bundles of wood so they could bridge across some of the streams and ponds. It took some time for everyone to successfully come across the bog, but they managed to safely, with only a few pack horses being killed. Once that they were clear, the Scots circled far around the English position and made their way back north towards their homeland. King Robert the Bruce was given the information that James and his men were isolated in Weardale, and fearing that there might be a disaster on the foot, he assembled a large army and sent them south to aid James. But on the way back, they both met up with each other and began to almost have a battle with each other until they realised they were both Scottish, and they joined up and went back home. Summarised. As morning dawned, the English saw the Scots had disappeared from the position. Some of the Hainaulters ascended the hillside to find the Scots had indeed been, vanished from existence, and they had slaughtered the cattle that were in the camp, and they left many pair of cowskin shoes for some reason. I don't fucking know. Lebel tells us that they found 5 English prisoners tied to trees out of sheer spite, even more based, and 2 had legs that were broken. When they reported back to their camp, the young king wept tears of frustration, Copensieve Angloid, and the army was disbanded, and Edward IV made his way to York. The Hainaulters had still to be paid because of mercenaries, and the bill for their hire came to £55,000. Around £55,000, which almost bankrupted the economy. Never one to rest where action could be, taken, Bruce done another massive three-prong raid, and he began to siege Norham Castle, while James and Randolph attacked Alnwick and Warkworth Castle, and Henry Percy of Alnwick thought this was the right time to lead the raid into Scotland, with Bruce, James and Randolph being busy attacking castles, so he thought he could raid a lot of towns in Scotland as revenge for Northern England. But when James heard this, he immediately gathered his men and went in pursuit of Percy, and when Percy heard that James was after him, he quickly turned around and ran back to Newcastle, hiding inside the walls. Just the name of Douglas made an army retreat. In October 1327, 2 English envoys came seeking King Robert the Bruce, who was still besieging Norham Castle. They were Henry Percy, the Lord of Alnwick, and an experienced lawyer. They were granted an audience with the King of Scots, and James and Randolph had joined their king at Norham, and so would have been present in this meeting. Bruce asked the envoys what was their mission, and they replied, for peace. After some deliberation, Bruce sent a letter to Edward III from Berwick on the 18th of October 1327. It outlined 6 points, and these were: England must recognise that Scotland is a free nation. Bruce's heir, Prince David, should be married to Edward III's sister Joanne. No subject of the King of England could demand lands in Scotland and vice versa. Scotland would give military aid against anyone who tried to invade England except for France, and England would do this likewise for Scotland. Scotland would pay England £20,000. England would put pressure on the Pope to have the excommunication against Bruce lifted. Edward III wrote back on the 30th of October saying that he was happy with the idea of the marriage between David and Joanne, and that he was happy with the offer of £20,000, but he wanted to negotiate on some other points. If he received satisfaction on these points, then he would recognise Robert the Bruce's title to the Kingdom of Scotland. Although the English had approached the Scots for peace, the language that English used made it look like the Scots were actually coming to them for peace. After 20 years being slapped about, they were still being arrogant. So James appeared at Newcastle as a Scottish envoy and was there to debate the lasting peace deals between the two nations. The negotiations went quite well, with a general agreement between both sides. An English Parliament was held at York in March 1328. There a letter was issued which finished with these words: "Be willing concede for us and all our heirs and successors by the Common Council assent and consent of the prelates, magnates, earls and barons and communities of our realm and our Parliament, that the Kingdom of Scotland shall remain for ever separate in all respects from the Kingdom of England, and is entirely free and in peace, without any kind of subjugation, servitude, claim or demand, with its rights boundaries as they were held and preserved in the time of Alexander the Good memory. King of Scotland last decreed to the magnificent Prince the Lord Robert, by God's grace, illustrious King of Scots, our ally and our very dear friend, and to his heirs and successors." Bruce insisted that the treaty be finalised in Edinburgh as a mark of respect for Scotland, so the English delegation came north on the 10th of March 1328, but Bruce could not attend because he was bedbound at the time, so James and Randolph went for him. And with that, Scotland was back to being independent and free from English control. After Bruce's whole life, he finally achieved himself to be King of Scotland and to be independent. That's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I am hopefully in the future videos going to add some more cinematics and things to look at. I've been fanning about with the whole troops moving on a field battle, but I'm kind of apprehensive to do it for some videos because we don't know where they fought, and it's the dog's going apeshit. The whole house mad. I'll see you all later. Goodbye. Enjoy the video. I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't think anyone's going to actually... If you hear this, comment pigeon.